Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Talk.
A real Celtic talk show by real Celtic fans from the Carluke Shamrock Supporters Club on Hail Media.
Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, 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 Talk.
Hail, and welcome to Tic Talk with the Carluke Shamrock Celtic Supporters Club. My name is Richard, and this session is being recorded on Tuesday, the 28th of August 2012. You can find more information about the club at mcclymonscott.com, and of course this podcast and all the other Celtic family podcasts are at hailmedia.com. Now tonight I'm joined on the panel by, from the club, first of all, Michael. Good evening.
Thanks, Richard. Yes.
Looking forward to this?
I am, yes.
Good man.
Get a different view, different perspective of things.
That's it. Quickly put you in the spot. Your European nerves building for tomorrow night, first of all. And what's your score prediction?
I was driving in here and I heard the radio and I heard Neil Lennon speaking, and that just brought it all back again. It's an important game tomorrow night again. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think we've done enough. I really do. I know
So
you don't like me getting into big monologues and all that.
No,
but
you can't
I'll keep
do
quiet
that.
here, but I think it'll be one each.
One each.
I think we'll be quite nervous night,
Right.
because there's a lot at stake going by what previously has happened, you know. So
Okay,
wait and see.
We'll see how we go on, if we can talk about that a bit more. Where are we, Michael? We are in the posh, salubrious, some might say regal towers of STV.
Yes.
There's a couple of guys chuckling here. That's because, of course, this one is a special edition podcast where we are with the Twitterati of the STV Sports guys. So go round the table, if you can give us your names and also your Twitter handle, and then that way the listeners can start to put a voice to the kind of names that haunt them on their timelines all during the day. So first of all,
I'm Mike Farrell. My Twitter handle is mikefstv, and I'm a news reporter for STV Online.
good man.
I'm Scott McClymont. My Twitter handle is mcclymontscott, and I'm a freelance sports journalist for STV.
Good, okay.
And I'm Grant Russell at STV Grant on Twitter, and I'm an online sports journalist for STV, surprisingly.
Fantastic. First of all, thanks guys, thanks for hosting us, thanks for making your time available. I know you're busy chaps, especially yourself, Scott, you're on holiday.
Absolutely.
Poor guy, dragged in. You must have had the garden to do or something.
Yeah, I'm lesser spotted in here, kind of like a lion in Essex.
Always keep it topical. Love it.
He's a company man, but because he's got the STV jumper on, you know.
Perfect. Just because it's no telly. Good man. Okay, well guys, the one rule is with TikTok is real opinion from real fans. Now, most of our listeners are obviously Celtic fans. You guys will undoubtedly be football fans. You'll have a passion for that, an interest for that, and that's what we're here for. You guys are inside the game, inside the media, different angles, different viewpoints, different experiences. So feel free, even if Michael tries to argue with you. See how you get on. With a record number of questions in for the listeners. So first of all, I'll apologise to everybody that I will not be able to read out every single name. As you can imagine, loads of duplicate questions, so I've grouped them together, so you will hear your question read out, except, funnily enough, for 7 questions. We had 7 questions in about Keith Downey's hair. I kid you not, asking about his stylist and his hair products. Some of them, I'm sure, were just for a laugh. Some of them were a wee bit unsettling and seemed to be totally serious. So I'll admit up front that we've taken name out. But that aside, we'll crack on and get through them. So, first category is going to be social media.
Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, 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 Talk.
Right guys, social media, a nice easy one to start with. Claire Grant from Stranraer. Please ask their guys, when it comes to social media, what percentage split do they reckon they use things such as Twitter, Facebook, blogs, official sites and Google, whether it's for their work or their personal use? So Mike, what kind of toys do you normally play with?
Well, I think certainly for work, Twitter's probably the sort of number one social media agent. We do sort of use a lot of Facebook and stuff. That's more, we'll take a kind of maybe a sort of lighter hearted story and maybe try and generate a bit of discussion about it. But Twitter's kind of like, it can be a source of stories, it can be a place where most of the time you're sort of fielding questions from different folk who are sort of following different tales. And then we'll obviously you sort of keep an eye through various other news sources through stuff like Google News searches and Google updates and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Which again, I'm sure some of the guys like Grant will be able to tell you every now and then you'll hear of, you'll find out some media outlet on the other side of the world linking such and such with a team in Scotland or whatever, which you would never normally find.
Of course.
Before, but so in terms of like a sort of percentage, I mean, I would say for me personally, I use Facebook's more sort of personal thing,
right?
But like Twitter is the main one I use for work.
Getting the source.
Yeah.
And Scott, yourself, mostly Twitter when filling in information?
Yeah, absolutely. Twitter's is without doubt the main one. I'd say it's maybe 80-85% odd. I'd use Twitter for. Quite like Mike. Facebook is more personal and seems to be loads of pictures of people's new babies and things like that. So you don't get much news on there. But if it's something that we would describe as a talker, a story that will get, often maybe international Scotland stories will get people talking. Those are the kind of things we use Facebook for. But in general, Twitter's the main one.
Okay. And Grant, are you ever off Twitter?
Yeah, much to the annoyance of my girlfriend, no, never on.
But same idea of Twitter as
I mean, in a professional sense, yeah, definitely. Twitter for engaging, for gathering information, for obviously for pointing people direction of our stories and such like. I mean, like the guys have touched on, Facebook's a bit of a difficult one to crack, again, in a professional sense, because it's so focused around your friends. The only way you can really get in with Facebook if you somehow manage to convince someone to share something they've found interesting to them, their friends, and it grows like that. So it's about finding the balance of what do people genuinely find interesting. So we've tried different things. We've obviously got the SBL goals now, so we try to penetrate in that sense. So it's been a more difficult one than Twitter, which just absolutely grew beyond imagination. Yeah, it really, really did.
Yeah, excellent. We've got more questions about kind of sources and news gathering on that. We'll definitely come back to. Scott, let me throw this one to you. Big Mark, who describes himself formerly Drumchapel, but now Queens of New York for the last 8 years. Lucky man. Really looking forward to the show. Perhaps Tic Talk will unmask these guys as just a grand plot by STV to create a set of fake Twitter accounts to make Scottish media look reasonable. That's quite good. Only kidding. I personally think that these guys are really good at engaging with the ordinary fan and explaining their stories and information. Here's a question. Do they ever regret being so accessible on Twitter? And what is the split they find between reasonable discussion and psychos on their timelines?
In answer to do we ever regret, personally, no, I don't, because I think as a journalist you've got to put yourself out there in a certain respect, and as long as your work stands yourself up, you should have no real problem speaking to people, discussing stories and engaging with so many fans of different clubs. In terms of percentage, I tend to find personally, I'm not quite as high profile, don't have as many followers as Grant or Andy do, but I tend to find it's more reasonable discussion than abuse. I think,
So Michael's not following you then?
Well, but no, absolutely. I think I've found it a very rewarding experience, and I certainly don't regret the way we go about it.
Okay, good man. Grant, let me throw this one to you. David McKendrick, who's known as Bonkle Soul on Twitter, funnily enough. Well done on arranging the show. We'd love to know how embedded social media has become as an actual source for mainstream journalists. Obviously, you spoke about it just earlier on, how it's quite strong. Is it one of the most powerful sources, or is there still the odd phone call and letter and what have you?
Traditional journalism hasn't gone away. I mean, speaking to sources, gathering information by other means, that still exists. Social media is an extra layer.
Right.
Well, on the internet, in general, I think it's an extra layer, because as Mike touched upon, we've got Google News searches that you can do around the world, and you can pull in information in seconds. But in social media regard, I mean, it's no secret that a few transfer stories over the years have come from, well, I was sitting next to such and such on a flight, or I saw such and such in this place, and sometimes they're not necessarily believable, but there have been on occasion that's come up. So social media is definitely a source. Not the main source, but I mean, as it continues to grow, of course, it has more and more of a role, and we use social media so heavily in our jobs that it's inevitable.
Yeah, it's going to have, it's a communication channel. However somebody's going to use it. Michael, when you think about how as a fan you kind of gather your information these days with regards to telly, news, papers, phone-ins, that kind of stuff, but before that, Mike, James Cuff from Manchester, with a close season that saw the likes of Paul from Celtic Quick News on the Sports Sound show a few times, The likes of Stuart Cosgrove make only a reference to articles by Brogan Rogan. Does the panel think that the lines between mainstream media and new media will continue to be blurred? And what do they believe the benefits and the risks are to this?
Well, I certainly think the lines are definitely blurring, yeah. I mean, and I think that will continue to happen. I think, obviously, if you take the example of stuff like the Rangers story and the way it's grown online and everything, I think it's definitely highlighted. Certainly to myself, I sort of moved to STV from a newspaper background, so it was far more sort of traditional reporting, court report and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But coming into this and seeing how it works is that the sort of the traditional, the mainstream media outlets, there's no, they don't have a sort of monopoly on the information or on the story.
Sure.
And while that's probably always been the case, now there are the other channels in which people out with the media can share a story and discuss about things about it. So I think the lines will continue to be blurred, and I think there's a lot of movement. I mean, I know sports guys do a lot of stuff. They try and get various bloggers and stuff involved to do previews for the upcoming season.
Ah, yes,
like I think we've also ahead of the Helsingborg game last week. There was we got Tic Talk in to.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to cover that on TV. That's right.
So yeah, so it's kind of it seems to be it's like and as you're saying, bloggers and online sources are now sort of becoming authorities or such on subjects in the mainstream media. I think that's a good thing. I think improves sort of just basically people sort of who are interested in different topics, looking to try and find out more about it. I think that's a good thing.
Right.
But at the same time, I think I suppose it's a sort of debate about where journalism's going and all that. You're looking at sort of WikiLeaks and everything. You're getting in that territory there.
Of course, yeah.
Is it dangerous or does it have drawbacks? It probably does, but at the same time, I think it's happening. It's happening regardless. I think if you're going to sit there, if you're working for a newspaper or a broadcaster, and if you sit there and say, I don't care, I'm not engaging with this, then I think you're making a pretty fatal mistake.
Right, okay. Grant, go along with that?
Yeah.
Does the benefits totally outweigh the risks?
I would say so, and with regards to blurring the lines as well, I'd like to think at STV, since we've come in and tried to change the sports site, we've contributed to blurring those lines, and because we're so heavily engaged and immersed with that community, and yes, in certain aspects of our coverage, perhaps we could even more of a nod to some of the things that have been done. I mean, Rangers Tax Case blog and so on and so forth.
Sure.
So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but there's also a lot of things you pull in from that. And as Mike touched on for the Helsingborg game, we've got Michael Gunn, Tic Talk heavily involved. We do football talk every day, which is looking around all the blogs, all the sources, championing what these people do.
Earlier you were talking about, is it debating the decisions and stuff? I've seen you tweeting that earlier.
Yeah, new thing we're doing starting next week is the Fans Tribunal. So so it'll be clips of controversial incidents, and it's down to the fans. We'll do it like the SFA do, a taxi rank system. We'll pick out 3 fans. You can't be involved if your club's involved, and you can say, did they get the decision right? And it's another great way to provoke debate, but also allow people to have a say, because everyone's got an opinion. We've seen that on Twitter. It's so much. It's another fantastic way to engage people.
Good stuff. So the fan, Michael, yourself, as a kind of taste study, how have you seen yourself changing over the years with papers and phone-ins and stuff?
I'm sitting here just fascinated with these guys, the way they're communicating across here to us, because my past is traditional newspapers.
Right.
When you think about newspapers as yesterday's news, right? To this day and age, to get internet, Twitter, texting as well. We've not touched on texting as well.
True,
the amount of people that text, somebody signed for Celtic or Rangers or whoever it's been, or a scandal has been texting tend to be. Relating back to our club, the Club Shamrock, we have got varied members, right? We've got old members, young members, guys who don't have mobile phones, different things. And I'm continually sending texts out for buses and events and things. I've also got handouts. I also do the Twitter through yourself, Richard. I've also got a Facebook page. So there's loads of other things that we do. I find that myself personally, I've only joined Twitter probably in the past 6 months.
Right.
And it's funny you should say that about myself, because I was talking to the president of our club last night, Peter Conley, and he only joined Twitter yesterday.
Oh, really?
And he was sending me through his because we're coming on this tonight, he's obviously trying to get people follow people and that. He was like, how do you go about it? You go to mine and you'll be able to link them all. And I think that's a good thing about Twitter, is the fact that I made the mistake at the start when I joined, when I was getting Richards, he's got to mine and copy some, and you copy other people, and you get some idiots on there. You can block them.
Aye.
Yeah, so that's great about it. You know what I mean? But there's lots
The
more.
Scots on holiday a lot, so...
Again, what was it? McClymont, Again, don't mention it.
The birth of a stalker.
No, and you know, I was scribbling down there when Mike was speaking there, and I couldn't tell you the last time I bought a newspaper.
Really?
You know,
Right,
and that's the thing, you know, and you're saying about my sort of knowledge of Twitter and internet is probably limited to these guys around the table.
Right.
But for information, Twitter,
Second
internet, you know, straight away onto the websites, etc.
Uh-huh.
You know, and you guys are also putting it out first. The thing that fascinates me, just to throw a wee question in, take away your glory here, Richard, is the fact that if a story breaks, a sports, or to use a sports story here, it's a competition to see who sends it first. You know, see if you look at it, it's quite funny to see who can actually get it
The
out
different
first.
journalists
And then
and stuff.
you see other people cutting it and putting it into their logo and things, you know, as if to say, I've just copied that, you know, I don't like retweeting it, you know.
That's been a journey for us, I think, especially when we first came onto Twitter, and especially the online guys like Scott, myself, Mike, Andrew Coyle, other people have been involved, Jamie Bothwick as well. You know, we've just, because we're on Twitter all the time, we learned how things work, how not to do things, and then the television journalists who've got 101 other things to do, and we had to kind of go along with them and say, well, this is how we should do it. So I think we've got to a stage now where, right, okay, we know that it makes no sense for 6 of us to flood one person's timeline with the same writing, the exact same, you know, in the same link. So it's about finding the balance there.
Right.
With regards to being the fastest to get the information out, again, that's another learning process. And as journalists, you have to temper your enthusiasm with the basic principle of, is the story right?
Yes.
You know, and that's been something else. You've really got to try and curb your enthusiasm. I think we've more or less perfected it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, certain stories, I mean, even news conferences where people are tweeting from that, it's a complete foot race to get things out. People don't necessarily always think about the quality of the information they're putting out, it's about being first. And so that's something we've really tried to take in, have discussion and trying to work on to make sure that if we're saying less, if we're not saying it first, we're saying it right, we're given a bit more quality and information.
Right, so
Because,
background, reference stuff.
Yeah, I think
right.
we've maybe... Okay, we're not completely there, we're not the top source in Scotland by any sense, or any stretch of the imagination, but I think we've got to a stage now where, okay, we know we don't always have to be first, because we've got an audience that will say, okay, BBC are saying that, what are STV saying? Whereas before it was like, we've got to be first, we've got to be the first out, whereas we've got to make this reputation, we are breaking news, and I think we still are. I think we're now hopefully at a stage with, at least with our core audience online, where we can say, right, we don't, although it's in us, we want to be first, we want to get that story out there, we can take a step back and go, okay, let's get this absolutely spot on, because we know people will still look to us and people will still click on our links or engage with us, and we can still speak about it afterwards.
Right, good stuff, fascinating, excellent. Right, we'll move on to TV next.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Righty-ho, so television category, there was loads of positive feedback about the STV live screening of the last Celtic game there. I've got 4 I just grabbed at random here. Jackie Burns from Inverness, loved hearing Chris Sutton review the match, 1,000,000 times more sensible and insightful than the normal pundits. Mark C from Jedburgh, I set up the HD channel for the match, and Wee Strachan is hands down the best guy to listen to around a football match on TV. Steve McDonald from Belfast, the commentating during the match was so much more positive and knowledgeable than normal, great stuff. And Jessica Strait from Dumfries, while I thought that poor wee Rahman looked a wee bit awkward and nervous, overall I absolutely loved the coverage, breath of fresh air. There you go.
That's brilliant.
Okay, so I'll see how you get your own feedback and stuff in the show and what your thoughts about it first. But a wee question, Saul Cavendish from Knightsbridge in London, really enjoyed the ITV coverage of the Celtic match and can't wait to fly up to Glasgow for the second leg. For me, Parkhead is unbeatable for atmosphere on European nights. Ask the guys if that's just a personal bias, or do they actually find that journalist colleagues from other countries also impressed by the atmosphere? So before we go into kind of TV coverage and stuff, could we answer Saul's? Anybody in particular that kind of focuses on the match or deals with other colleagues from around the world that would be able to answer that?
Yeah, but I mean, certainly any journalists, foreign journalists that I've spoken to after Celtic games at European night, so have commented on the atmosphere, and certainly something that I've seen in Yeah, I can absolutely agree.
It's not just a wee personal bias from a fan.
No, I think a lot of Scottish grounds can be extremely special. I've been to Fir Park, I've been to Rugby Park on European nights, and I've listened to Tynecastle as well, and I think there is something about the Scottish crowds on big occasions that regularly deliver, and Celtic Park's certainly one of them on European nights.
Mm-hmm. So, the TV coverage, going for the live screen and stuff, how did it go? Lessons learned, what was the feedback like?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we came into that, it wasn't decided till late on the week before we did it that we would actually do it. We knew that ITV were taking the game, and it was our decision therefore to, are we going to do our own thing? Because the way it works at the moment, any viewer will know this from having seen Champions League coverage in the last couple of years. You just take what ITV put out. So it was an encouraging decision, from STV. We all pushed very hard for them to do, and it was such a great feeling when we were told that we're going to do our own thing, and we were saying what can we do online? But then we're also talking about although it's not we aren't the people that have the say in what goes out on TV. There's other people much higher up than us that make the decisions and have years and years and years of experience of what works and what doesn't. But
sure, the
attitude of this company is such, especially such a nimble company now, that they want to hear the opinions of guys like us. We were in production meetings, we were saying, look, we're listening, we're hearing what everyone's saying out there, we've got our own opinions as well. We have to do this a bit differently. We want people in that aren't just going to be there to stoke it up or just pull the most recognisable face, from, who can we think of for Celtic? Let's just get them in and get them sit down and let them rabble on, not really in any sort of direction whatsoever. Right. We wanted to push that across there. It was going to be informative. We wanted pundits in that knew the game, were able to talk the game, could analyse what was going on the fly. So that was a big push from us, and I think STV delivered in that sense, of course. There were criticisms as well. There are a lot of things to work on, but for a first one we've done in a while for a club game, we obviously did Scotland-Brazil last year, I think it was, and we did Rangers-Man United the year before that, but certainly in that regard, considering the time we'd spent out and the time that was spent on it, so close to going out on air that it was put together, I think we did a great job, and it's great to hear comments, but it's also great to hear constructive criticism from people as well.
Things to think
because
about.
If we get the opportunity to do this again, and that's, we'll continue to crowdsource what people want to hear and see.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Mike, why can't we get STV on HD?
I'll have to defer you to my boss on that one. I really don't have a clue.
Some strange Sky contract.
I think there's meant to be, there has been chat of it, and I think there's also chat of an STV HD player app or something as well.
Oh, right.
But to tell the truth, I literally don't know. I'm sorry, I'm absolutely useless on this one.
We had plenty of questions on that last week. We just had to hold our hands up and go, look, we generally know, you get it on Virgin Media, I know, and it's out there, we just don't know. And we're having to say, well, you can search to try and find out. Just go to Google and see if you can find it without trying to see it. We don't know what ground we were actually on with that. I'm sure it's perfectly legitimate to look it up and plug it into your box, but nobody here or down on the floor knows the answer to that.
Okay, no problem. Thankfully, Kevin from our club, Michael, was sending us
Kevin
the details.
Fantastic.
How to add it in, which was good. Yourself, as the fan watching it, how did you enjoy the coverage?
I just actually come back from Belfast for the weekend, and I'd come into the house and Neil Lennon was just getting interviewed at the point, and then went to the break, and then Rahman came on, and I agree with the caller there that wrote in and says that he looked uncomfortable. Right. But I think, like you're saying there, Grant, that it was his first time as an anchor man, and tremendous taking that on board. I didn't know that was his first. Sorry, I didn't realise that was your first production from this studio here.
I think Rahman's done stuff in the past, certainly the Champions League highlights a couple of years ago. I know he's on the news every night, but that sort of experience is
totally different.
Me personally, this probably goes against the grain. I was getting through Twitter and text messages, ITV4 and London and things like that. And again, I did at half time. I didn't see any of the STV coverage. I was Strachan was with Lee Dyson and Gareth Southgate, and I can't really comment on up here. But what they did down there was the sort of slow motions and the pen on the screen and things and different boxes and things. I'm not sure if you guys did that here. You didn't know, but that's a thing to aspire to in the future. Mm-hmm. If it's your first production. But I'm only being honest here, and you're saying about constructive criticism, so I can be honest say I've only watched the channel from down south. Yeah. And I like the person says, and you were nodding there, Grant, that Gordon Strachan's analysis tends to be first class. And obviously we knowing a lot of the players in the background of the club, I think that helps the situation as well. But it's probably Joe Jordan not like a connection with Celtic lately at all. It's a bit difficult for him to relate closely to it. I think, you know, being involved with Harry Redknapp, Spurs and Portsmouth, you're away from up here. So it's, but first class to you guys for pushing for it to go out from up here. You know,
good stuff. Okay. Niall from Exeter threw us in 2 questions. Scott, you take us first one here. With the BBC firmly supporting the English Premier League, is there not a possibility for STV to bring back their own Scottish football highlights package and put it on at a time to suit us and not fit around the EPL?
Well, I'm sure I can speak for everyone in the sports team that it'd be something we would love to do if we could. I don't know what the budget's like at the moment. If that would be possible, I tend to suggest it probably isn't just now. But
is that the Coast Guard? You couldn't even bring us water.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the level it's reached here. So yeah, I mean, listen, we'd love to do it. The more coverage we can get of Scottish football, I think would be the better. Everyone here on the team is extremely enthusiastic about promoting Scottish football and getting as much as we can about talking up the game here, and certainly a really good highlights programme would be something we'd want to do. But
there's nothing on the horizon you know about?
Not that I know about, no.
Okay.
I'm afraid not.
Sorry to interject, I mean, as I've been doing a few times, I mean, we've just acquired the SPL highlights this season, so I mean, that's a great step in the right direction. Online highlights, so they'll be shown on TV on the news package as well. At the moment, so it's 2 minutes of every game, and we can feature the match for 4 minutes. So I mean, that's just landed in our laps essentially 3 4 weeks ago. So suddenly we're like, right, what can we do? And we're trying to come up with creative stuff. I mean, the fans panel we talked about previously and so on. But regards a highlight show, I'd say it's definitely something that's talked about. It's just about how we do it, on what platform, what resource we can possibly put into it. But I mean, everyone here wants to do it. That's not in any doubt. It's definitely something that we want to do. It's just about, what is it about? I don't want to say it's about money, because that's not necessarily true. I think it's about resource and time and being able to get everyone together and say, right, how could, because we want to do it right, we want to really strike the right note. You've got to plan these things, I think, and get it absolutely spot on, because we do the way we tend to do things online, we just go for it.
Right.
Like all the stuff last Tuesday, we ahead of the Hillsborough game, we just went for it, and some of it looked great, some of it looked, okay. But all the content was there. The content and the sentiment is there. The will to want to do this right in the right way. But I think with a highlight show, we've got to try and get that absolutely spot on before we're able to do it.
Okay. Now, second question. This might be good for yourself with the different backgrounds in your reporting and stuff. See what you think of this format he's looking for. Can journalists who report on the match days create a formula to write up a match that makes it easier to read through with less hyperbole? For example, starting with formation, notes on the crowd and attendance, and then the match itself. Too much column inches are wasted on dross and nonsense that has nothing to do with the game itself. Is there something in that, having a structure or a framework, or does that make it too boring?
I think it's like all good journalism. It's not just reporting what happened, it's also putting it in a sort of format which is understandable and engaging. I tend to agree. You see a lot of match reports full of sort of journalese, and cliche, and I don't think that strikes a chord with anyone anymore. I don't. In terms of what would be the best way to present a match, what would be the best way to avoid that? I wouldn't really know. Right. But with a lot of different types of reporting, there is a kind of formulaic approach you can take.
Right.
I think we with the online reports we do, they're generally just pretty, describe the instance in the match, the key flashpoints, the goals, and the like. And also have all the team information there, because that's the thing that I think lacks in quite a lot of. It's quite a basic thing. You want to know the attendance, or the official attendance figures. You want to know the team, sort of the lineup at the start, who was subbed on. An awful lot of match reports now, you're sort of looking in the paper for it. But I think I think there's definitely one of the things with it. It's along the lines of the whole sort of the new media and traditional media sort of coming together and basically taking a look at each other in many ways.
Right.
I think one of the things is now, people will be quite upfront and say, right, I don't want to read about sort of cliched match reports full of tired old stuff that they read about. They read the same sentences, 5 or 6 times that season. So I think there is. I think there probably is. I need to sort of redo the report. But then again, I suppose it depends where you're going for your. There's different outlets report things differently. But yeah, I think it's an interesting point.
Yeah. Graham, you going to say?
Yeah, it's actually something we're looking into right now. How can we change match reports? Because I think, speaking from a personal perspective here, I don't read match reports.
Right.
I just don't. I mean, they don't engage me enough. I mean, if I'm going, I want to see the highlights. If something particularly fascinating happened, I will go and I'll dip in and try and find out what it was. But I mean, if I'm speaking in a professional sense, if I go back, I just want to know certain things about a game. I just want to know the scorers, the attendance, the key incidents. If someone can tell me the 10 things that happened in that game in a sort of British format, is that, speaking historically and looking back, is that the right format to go down? So actually it is something that's under review here at the moment. What is the future of the match report?
Okay. Nice one, that's interesting. Mike, I know you might have to sneak out just now.
Yeah.
But the timelines, thanks very much for what you've done, appreciate that.
Cool. Sure.
We'll crack on with talking about the TV deal itself, so what's going to happen with Scottish football. Prefontaine from Melbourne, one of our Hail Media guys, he wrote in one of his articles, the Germans got a better deal out of Versailles than the SPL has from the broadcasters. Fair enough. Johnny Russell, not that one, this one's from Ontario in Canada. As someone who literally depends on TV coverage to keep up with football, I thought the SPL deal with Sky, their Armageddon predictions in advance of those negotiations, and the media's role in general as pessimistic doomsayers was a combined screw-up for Scottish football. What are the panel's thoughts on these matters? Scott, what do you think about the deal and how it was dealt with and reported, etc.?
In terms of the deal, there's been a strange lack of detail, not for want of trying, I can say on our part, for trying to find out the figures. There seems to be a reluctance from the parties involved to disclose how much exactly they are paying for this deal, and I could not tell you why that is, but are you getting rebuffed with kind of simple things like, it's commercial sensitivity, or are they just not responding at all?
No, so essentially when you get them on the phone, they will just not disclose the details. They say, no, we don't. The intended way it works that they have a firm that represents their channel, so it's going through so many channels that they can't get you the figure, and it's extremely frustrating. And I wouldn't like certainly the perception that it's not for a lack of trying to get this detail, because fans deserve to know what these figures are. And the first stage, when it was first the Sky partnership was announced, and before ESPN officially confirmed, the clubs didn't even know the figure until 3 days after Sky had officially announced, and to me that's just absolutely baffling. But in terms of how it's reported, the Armageddon scenario has been mentioned. Again, I think it's important when speaking about the media that it's broken down into sections of the media. The media in itself is kind of like Godzilla. It's a big, massive machine, and there's so many parts to it that it needs to be differentiated between. Yes, certain parts of the media did report it as Armageddon and financial collapse, and that certainly doesn't seem to be the case. On that, I mean, certain leading figures have gone on record, pushing that line, and they've been asked to be answered to of how they came to that conclusion. And we did a feature-length interview with Stuart Regan where Rahman put that exact question to him. So when is this happening? And only they can answer why they went down that line. And I don't think it was a particularly good line to go down. As I say, we try and, you can't look for the positives sometimes where there are none, but in general of the game, we try and accentuate the positives where they can be seen. And in terms of the deal, it's only, I think, once we get the full detail that we can then analyse whether the game has been undersold. There certainly seems to be that perception that the game here deserves to get more, but there's on the other side, we want to perhaps bring the game more towards the fans and away from the game being dictated to by television. So there's definitely a balance to be struck there, and I think in general it's almost a wait and see policy.
Okay. Mike, Sorry, Mike, I'm talking to a guy who's just left. Very good. Grant, when we talk about the deal, as Scott was saying there, we can't get down to the nitty-gritty details, and this is what you're chasing. But in general, obviously, when they were talking about the last deal that they got, and then they were trying to get close to that, or just a wee bit under. For example, that you've probably seen it yourself, the Saint in Asia blog, the St Johnstone chap, who scanned across the whole of Europe and put up, the attendances, showed how big Scotland was, but the deal itself was just ridiculous. Is that kind of personal view you would share as well?
Well, let me firstly say it was a fantastic analysis, which was picked up again by the Herald as well, who obviously gave them 2 pages as well, and that was brilliant. Shows you the strength of the blogosphere again. But in terms of the deal and the figures that are presented there, yes, there is a compelling argument that our game's been undersold, especially when you can just put it next to something else and say, well, look at this, look at the attendance figures, look at the TV audience, and they're getting 5 times. I don't want to say it's a simplistic argument. Yes, I think Scottish football is not getting the money put into it deserves from TV, but I think there are certain overriding factors. One is the English Premier League, and the fact it's broadcast. Well, it's broadcast all around the world, so perhaps that's not actually a fair argument. But certainly here, it's so heavily predicated on that's their big product. Sky. If you talk about Sky TV first and foremost, that's their big hitter. Yeah. And Scottish Premier League, of course, they want to show it, but how bothered about it are they? Are they just here to appease subscribers? Why are they investing in the game? What's necessarily in it for them? Because their big product is there. That's what they live off of. It's all they need. Spanish coverage as well, but it doesn't do fantastic audience either. I think it's a niche kind of almost element for them. Right. There's also the argument, of course, as well, that who else is going to pay money for Scottish football? Sky and ESPN are the only ones at the table here. Right. STV aren't going to pay
budget to match that.
Well, of course not, absolutely not. And maybe it's something to say for how the SPL structures its broadcasting deal. Should there be ways in for companies like STV to be able to pick up even 4 live games a season for a certain fee? Yeah. It's all about the marketing of the league. Do they just want to get the figures in, the best, scrape in the most they can get off of this one company, a monopoly or duopoly if you bring ESPN into it? Or should be looking to market the game in a certain sense where, okay, they'll maybe get a little bit less, but in terms of exposure, what they can get from having 5 games on STV, 5 on the BBC, whatever, markets the league to to an extent where the next deal is going to be worth so much more. It's got so much more marketability in that sense. And there's arguments there as well for are they doing it right in that regard when they're even structuring these deals.
Perfect. That's actually a perfect thing for the last 2 mentions on that, actually, because they're focusing on it's not just about the money. Frankie Douglas got in touch through Twitter and said, loving the use of YouTube by the SBL to show small snippets and goal roundups, etc. Surely these and other out-of-the-box ideas are what's needed by both the authorities and the broadcasters to enhance our game. And then, of course, if I just pay credit to the likes of Eddie Pearson and Harry Brady from the Celtic Underground, their last podcast, they were talking about ideas such as awarding TV contracts, not just in the price, but on the service. So in other words, right, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to show it? What's your studio? What's your format? What's your guests, etc., that kind of thing. And other things such as the guys had ideas like, what about other spin-off shows, like a show during kids' times television that would present things like bald skills, showcase players from different teams, and, and it builds up that branding, the marketability. Oh, there's so-and-so from that. I never knew about that guy at all. And suddenly he's got a fan base. Is it those kind of things we should be chasing, Scott, do you think, and not just the bottom dollar?
Yeah, I think there certainly is an argument for that. I think there's an argument that to bring people closer to the game and people within the game. There's so much in Scottish football that we don't tend to see, or you don't get the chance to see, and some of those ideas would certainly help do that. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see, from a fan's point of view, a bit more behind the scenes at clubs, how SPL clubs are run. You tend to get little snippets from the English Premier League in that regard, but I think you'd get a kind of different product and a bit more appreciation and recognise more faces from some of the clubs that aren't on television so often. So yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Is there any other things that you are working on, Grant, you want to kind of showcase at the moment? You've obviously seen the I don't know what you would title it as, the kind of video cast you had with yourself and different fans were on the one screen.
The Google Hangout.
There you go. Talk about the tribunal as well. Mm-hmm. Is there any other ideas you're working on at the moment?
Well, we're considering various things about how we can maximise our use of the SPL footage. I mean, as I said, we get 14 minutes a week, 2 minutes from each game and the 4 minutes for the featured match. It's about trying to think about what do people actually want from that, because I think early kind of indications are that people don't just want to watch the game. I mean, nobody will sit down and watch Kilmarnock against Dundee United highlights. I mean, even you might not be compelled to sit down and watch 2 minutes of the highlights, you know, or maybe perhaps you would, but I mean, to the general viewer, they're not going to sit down and watch 6 SPL games. They might not even watch a highlight show, or maybe if it's packaged in the right way, they might. I think, especially from our point of view, if we want to really maximise what we have at the moment, the bare minimum that we have at the moment, it's about really appealing to the mass market. Right, okay, this was a great goal. Have you seen a better goal?
Right.
So that's a feature we started. It's hashtag pick it out. So the idea being, and it will grow over time, it's a very slow burner at the moment, just trying to feel out how it's going to work. You know, pick an SPL goal. Look at his goals, incredible. Try and get it all around Twitter, all around social media in the UK, and say right. And encourage people to come in with better goals and try to build up a community in that sense. So if someone sends in a goal from the Ajax game or from a Botafogo game, or from an MLS game, right, we'll display that as well. We're putting the SPL in the same bracket as these goals. You know, so that's a kind of change of perception in that sense as well. What else are we doing? Fans tribunal, as we'd said, so people get to rule and referee decisions, controversial decisions, of which there have already been a few this season. I mean, that's not a vindictive thing. I think a couple of responses we got, the media was outright.
In case you thought you were undermining the referees.
Yeah, and one or two people were saying that. No one in authority said that. I think they're all fairly comfortable with it. I mean, that's not what we want to do. We never want to do anything negative. Yeah, this is the thing.
So you do have that mindset. So Scott was talking about every time you're looking at something, you're thinking, right, well, that's good. Well, that will push the awareness of Scottish football.
Accentuate the positives. I mean, you can't go these tinted specs all the time that everything is rosy in the garden of Scottish football, but it's about constructive criticism and not doing the game down. So if we were to go online and say, right, well, that game of the weekend, that was a load of nonsense, we're not going to do anything with that, and what can you actually pull out of that was interesting? It's like, well, that doesn't help anyone. I mean, if you ignore it, especially if you ignore it, or if you do it down, you're not aiding it in any sense. If you can constructively pick apart, or you can try and analyse it in a different way, and that's what we want to do. We want to do it refreshing. If we can't say anything about Aberdeen 0, Hearts 0, that's that bigs up what happened in the game, right? What can we do that's different? How can we analyse that game? Why wasn't there goals scored?
Absolutely.
Why, or the performance of one player, how that was particularly great, and build up his profile of the season and build up that kind of thing.
The knowledge of it.
They're all there. Well, there are no firm. Well, there are firm ideas, but at the moment it's kind of right, what can we do that really just builds up how the Scottish game is covered in a positive or constructive manner, and just try and change the coverage, whether it's using clips or doing analysis, or just trying to change that kind of perception where it's not just writing about, that game's rubbish at the weekend, let's not say about that, let's do something, let's talk about it, let's talk about why it wasn't particularly great, or let's say, well, this is why it wasn't great.
Was it the tactics, was it the formation,
something like that. We just want to be able to discuss the game in a reasonable manner, an analytical manner. I think that's what's lacking from Scottish media.
Right, okay. Michael, the fan, when it comes to television, mostly, if you're not at the game itself, are you mostly live? Are you looking at any highlights anywhere? Are you into the YouTube channels?
I've been on the YouTube as well a few times, but I think that getting back to reality, the old Scott Sport and the old coverage we were talking about earlier, getting back to what the fan wants, is the fan getting what should be getting now? I don't know. We're all shaking our heads here. This isn't getting filmed, but if it was, you would all see it. But I feel as if at the moment, through internet coverage, we're getting basics. Like you're saying, you're limited to what you can do. 2 minutes a game, 4 minutes for the big game. And that's quite difficult with Hearts away at Aberdeen, nil each. That's the problem. Like you're saying there about tomorrow night for the Helsingborg game. Like, if you guys were doing the highlights for that and it was nothing each, you'd probably talk about the atmosphere more than anything. I mean, we're talking about special nights tomorrow night. Mike was touching on it before he left, about the atmosphere and the big occasion, the buzz about the place, atmosphere. I bet it wasn't that at Pittodrie. I don't know where you guys were at it, but it's difficult when you're taking that coverage. From a fan's point of view, I feel as if there could be more out there when you see what the EPL is, but the problem is budgets and things, I think.
Would a fan want to go the opposite way, and if the clubs could survive without Sky, turn away from it, get your football on at Saturday 3 p.m, everybody at the same time, with that ancient old buzz with the radio in your ear and that kind of stuff.
I remember those
days.
And
you watch a highlights package.
I remember those days.
Would that enhance the game? Forcing people to go out.
I think so, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak to a lot of guys down south for my job and things, and they say they slag Scottish football off the bits. You know, they will. You'll always get that from England, no matter what. But like, for instance, the game last week was only game one in the UK. It was really talkative. You know, I would dress it up, and the amount of guys like I know in London and things were watching that game is phenomenal. You can tell it with your calls here,
yep.
you know. And I think that if I spoke to a guy and he says, "Would you watch Inverness against Motherwell?" and he says, "No." They wouldn't watch it. Right, that's the problem. We've got as a company, as a profile up in this country. That's the problem. But I remember I was working down in Croydon. I went into a local pub, and Celtic were playing Inverness away, and I couldn't get to the game. I was working, you know, I was down there, and I can't remember who was playing. It was just said it was Birmingham Aston Villa, and they were showing that game. And I was absolutely raging. And I said to the guy, "Put the Celtic game on." And eventually he came round and put it on, and the guys were all cheering, "Oh, brilliant!" And they were all just, and it was funny how they were watching Celtic. But I don't think anybody else would watch any other club.
If it was other.
You know, that's the problem.
And the pertinent question is, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Do we give them ammunition to hate it?
No.
Yeah, well,
I think we do. Is it really that bad? I don't think so.
No.
yeah.
I think it's,
Especially if you do cast an eye at EPL matches, you can see dozens and dozens that are.
you can watch a game anywhere in the world, and it doesn't live up to your.
I think if you're a football fan, you'll watch any football. I'll watch any football. Like you were talking about Spanish. If I go in tonight and I'll put the telly on and I'll flick through channels, whatever's on. I like sport in general, but if there's a football match on, I'll tend to watch it. That's the thing.
Right.
And put your comments on. You know, one of the guys in our club is forever on Twitter, and he'll maybe tweet something, and I'll reply back to it. Aye, you're right. You know, but it doesn't matter about Spanish or like you're talking about German football a wee while ago. Yep. German football boosted recently with the way they changed the structure over there, big time. Do we do that in Scottish football? I don't know. You know, but
Okay. Right, we'll bring that one to a close, and we'll go into media next.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Right, media. Right, sit forward in your seats. This is a tough one's coming.
I'm not getting involved in this one. Then I can sit back.
Well, you can see your perspective. Right, squeeze in as many as I can. No doubt, when you heard fans, internet bandpots coming, STV, you knew what they were going to ask about. The December 2011, the big story of the commercial agreement with a former club known as Rangers. As a wee example to you, 36 emails, 49 tweets, 13 direct messages, 38 Facebook messages and mails on top of that as well. So I know you've touched on it briefly before. I've personally seen it, but I know there's loads of fans that listen that aren't on Twitter as much. I'll give you the floor, see what you want about it. Mm-hmm. Is it still even active, or was it something that kind of finished off like a lot of other deals?
Perception is everything. I mean, I think as soon as that deal was announced, and I'm safe to say from what we've said on Twitter already that it was something that caught. I think it was Andrew and myself that were in working that day. Was it the day before the Glasgow derby that day?
It was the day off. The night before.
It was the night before, and we were just sat here getting ready for the game, and like started building up our coverage and whatnot, and this kind of landed in our laps, and we were like, "What?" You know. So I mean, that really caught us unawares. But that's by the by, I think. Right. If you want me to explain what the partnership was, what we eventually what was told.
Is it something that is still active? No, so it did finish as a natural course.
I don't want to say anything out of line here, but it's kind of like I think Rangers were a little bit cheeky in the way that they put it. They put it out there what it was, because if you just want me to tell you in one line what this partnership, I'm doing inverted commas here, was Rangers bought advertising space from STV to advertise the fact that you could watch the derby online if you were outside the UK.
Right,
bought
okay.
That once.
There you go.
And that was it. And I think perhaps there had been discussions about what can we do on a more broader basis of
where can we take this?
But then we never heard anything. And the thing that really got me, and again it's perception, that people thought immediately, well that's it. STV. They can never say anything about Rangers.
There's no impartiality.
STV is. I work for STV, but I work for STV News. And you've got to break it down into the fact that STV is a digital media company which has broader interests. You know, it does TV productions, it does stuff for the BBC, it does like Antiques Road Trip, whatever. You know, it does so many other things that when you think of STV, it's not just us guys on the floor in the newsroom. We are just one part of that. And for the suggestion to be that, right, well, because STV have got this partnership, inverted commas again, with Rangers that we would reporting would be affected was ludicrous. But I can completely understand why people would think that.
As you say, perception.
And it was firefighting from then on to say, oh God, this is ludicrous. And we state on record, we never had a conversation with anyone about this partnership apart from when we went asking, saying, what is going on? We were getting bombarded here, what can we say? We never had anyone, so no one spoke to us first and foremost about it to say, right, well, this is what it is, this is what it's essentially going to be. We found that out eventually.
Right.
There was never anyone came to us and says, well, we've got this deal, so you've got to be just watch what you're saying here, boys.
Come and have lunch.
Never ever a possibility, and I said it on Twitter, and I think I don't want to speak for everyone here. Your answer as well. I don't from what I'm about to say, but if anyone had come to me and said, right, Grant, you can't say that about Rangers. To see that story, you can't say that because of this partnership. I would say
that was your day.
Well, that's me. No, I'm gone.
I did see that from you. So I did see it.
And any journalist would think that as well. No journalist would work under those.
I done my perspective. I was in England the night it was announced, and it was a wedding in Newcastle up in the hills away from the actual city centre, so I had no mobile phone reception until I drove from the wedding the next morning to do the Glasgow Derby here.
Right.
And then until I actually got in here, I hadn't heard of this so-called partnership, and safe to say when I saw it, I was like, what is going on here? What have I signed up for here? And absolutely, I mean, any journalist being told what to write, that is it. You cannot work under those conditions, and as Grant has said, there was never any conversation. It has never affected our journalism, and it never will. And this partnership, it never was a partnership. It was one day selling advertising and nothing to do with the kind of news side of things. So to have it brought up still, exactly. I absolutely understand that Grant says why people ask about it. It's assumption, but people that other organisations that reported about it didn't fully look into what they were actually reporting about.
Sure. I don't get mortally offended by it anymore, but I get surprised if someone says, commercial partnership now. I'm like, come on. I think we've been over this.
We've done this. Look at my time.
But I completely, I would never criticise, although I was getting quite irate with people, but it's because it was what a storm of, I can't even begin to describe it. There were actually really bleak days. Obviously you were in Newcastle, but Andy and myself were sitting there thinking, what's going on here? And I think the initial fear was, regardless of whether it was done with the best intentions or whatever the idea was behind it, that our reputation was damaged beyond repair for something that was actually quite innocent. So.
Just shows you what can happen. Another example of social media, of course, where they can quickly just explode.
Absolutely, and you're firefighting from then on.
From that point, once it's out there, when somebody suggests,
and people make their minds up. As well, which was obviously another big thing, and you've got to work to try and change that perception. But I mean, actually, what we found, sorry to ramble on about this, but the way we actually found to change that perception was not to argue and say, you're talking nonsense, this doesn't exist, etc. It was just to carry on as normal.
Just do it right, go to your next
and then change the perception change. Because people saw, we reported first Rangers went into administration, for example, and it's like, we broke the story. And it was like, so from then on, then it was like, it's quite clear here that there is no conflict of interest.
Okay, good man. Michael, if you get into the canteen, look for succulent lamb. I'll move on to the next point. Right, we've got Charlie Brunton from Aberdeen. I am curious as to how the panel see themselves as individuals. Is it as broadcasters who simply provide the channels for various people and bodies to deliver their message? Is it as reporters who take an official message, scrutinise it and then report it as they see it to their audience? Or is it as journalists who are always digging and looking for the stories that are not offered up in the official messages? Scott, would you kind of fall into either of those brackets or something else?
I think there's a merge of some of them. Yeah, I mean, there are straight up stories that you get, and you check things out. Everything is checked. That's part of journalism. You use it, make sure you've got double sourced on stories. Things that come from official clubs, you can usually take them as read. But you're always digging for stories, you're always speaking to contacts and trying to find out what's going on.
Just bits of everything there.
Absolutely. I mean, the part of being a journalist is you're nosy and curious about things, so you're always wanting to speak to people, you're always wanting to hear things, and listen to what people have to say. So there's a mixture of all those things, I would say, in the role, and it is constantly changing, as Mike touched upon earlier.
Good man. Grant, when it comes to sources, just as Scott was saying there, Celtic Research got in touch, and in fact, if I just take a wee moment just to thank him, he helped me a great deal with preparing all the different categories and bringing the questions together, so thank you for that, my good man. And his question was, when a source or agent tells STV about a transfer, what do they do to back up the claims? What editorial safeguards are in place to prevent STV being used by unscrupulous agents seeking free publicity?
That's a very good question. Yeah. For every story, we've got to double source it. Well, we're on occasion we can go, right, we've got confidence in a story that we will go for it, and based on the one source. But you have to. I think you would ever take. Speaking from my own experience, you would never take someone at their one agent who's new to the party at their one word. It depends what the story is. Right. I think that's an important element there as well. We're talking about transfers, for example, since we're in the transfer window. Yeah. If an agent was to say, right, Celtic want to sign my player, we go, right, okay, well, let's consider here why you're telling me this, so you always try and back it up from the club, from the buying or selling club, or from another source, where it's a local journalist who might have heard something. You're trying absolutely everywhere to try and get that second source. Okay. It's a difficult one. I don't.
And then there's that rush with what you said earlier about being first to report.
Absolutely, you've got to be right, you've got to be accurate, because you can't just go on and say anything. There's always a danger that someone is using you for whatever reason, whether it's to promote their client, to try and get more money for themselves, to promote their image. Yeah. And of course, every journalist falls into, I think I'm wrong to say, every journalist falls into a trap of, especially when you establish a relationship with the contact, that the level of trust grows, and you think, right, I can say certain things, or I'll quote you on specific elements, and of course you're always going to go and try and corroborate that story, but you at least you've got a story there. Well, sometimes some people might say something to you and you go, well, that's nonsense, well, I'll check that out, but I'm not feeling that. But if you get a trusted relationship with someone, it's like, yeah, you can filter it, exactly. You always try to corroborate things, but there's always a danger there that a source might tell you something. But it's about being smart enough to say, right, I'm going to go and find out from someone else exactly what's going on here. So I can't think
corroboration is there.
I can think of stories where you may go on one source. I mean, it depends very much on the story, but you're always looking to double source something. And if it's, I don't know, if it's a business takeover, for example, if it's like a football club takeover, for example, you're going to want, right, someone saying one thing, and they're pushing their own agenda. I've got this to spend, I'm going to bring this person in, but you never go for that without speaking to someone who's involved on the other side.
Okay. I'll bring these next two questions in together. First of all, John Haddo emailed in, the Scottish media in general has a problem with powerful people and institutions, as evidenced by their failure to scrutinise and hold them to account for their actions. Is this a fair statement? And then I'll quickly group in, as I say, Michael Laird from Peneley. Why do the media singularly fail to confront and interrupt the inane babblings of Charles Green while he is actually making them? Lies are continually spouted, such as being relegated to the third division, punished with a ban from Europe, and his own personal hypocrisy of saying all the history will be lost without a CVA, and then turning that into we've ensured the history continues by buying and transferring assets. These lies seem to be reported and broadcast with impunity. With the facts, the rules and the likes of documents from UEFA, etc., why do the media not simply question him and stop him in his tracks at the time? Scott, does that happen? You'll go back to the earlier one about a broadcaster just simply allowing a guy just to put his message out. Is that fair that sometimes it should be interrupted?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly if you want to question his claims, and absolutely you can do so. I think there is a way of broadcasting where you make it clear that this is this person's opinion.
Right.
In terms of what we tend to do, if they're making these claims, you say you report it as such, and it's just straight up. This these claims. What we tend to do is then publish pieces that explain the rules and give more information as to how the current situation stands. I mean,
right.
in terms of people going unchallenged when they make claims, it probably does happen. there's also the school of thought that you let people finish what they're saying and then you ask a follow-up question.
Right.
That tends to be the way it can often happen. So there's different ways the situation can play itself out. As I say, we tend to go with these explainer pieces that break down a whole set of complex issues into the one piece. What we tend to find online certainly is that that's easier, and people can then keep that page and go back to go back to the Rangers story. Is certainly easier than referencing about 50 different articles around the issue.
All right, okay. Right. Grant, yourself, is there a fear of treading carefully that Scottish media have with powerful people?
I can't speak for the Scottish media as a whole. I mean,
Sure.
if you ask me about my perception, perhaps people want to keep certain contacts on side and let them carry on with a degree of impunity, if you like. But
Okay.
speak for STV's perspective on this. I mean, if something is said, right, let's take we're going to talk about the Rangers situation, relegated to the third division, right? It's rhetoric. You know, that's what they want to say, right?
Yeah.
But we've been relegated, right? So what we'll do, we'll report. That's what they've said, because that's they've said it. If we have the opportunity, and this is another mistake people sometimes make, and it's understandable that people think we don't question people, we just don't do it. Well, sometimes there's not always the opportunity to go back on something, or something's just said to you, or it comes in a press release or something like that. There's not always the opportunity to go back and back.
Sure,
And
sure.
believe me, we do, and you hit brick walls actually on quite a lot of occasions. But
Right.
we're talking about
And does that maybe just get edited out of a television piece, and then we'll not realise, actually, they asked that question 3 times. You know, there's a producer, for example, say, listen, you never got anywhere with that question, cut that, it's not important enough.
I don't think it's edited out, and I don't deny any pressures in that. It's about, right, if we're talking about TV, you've got 2 minutes to do a package on a certain thing, right? You're going to want to deliver what's being said.
Right.
And is there much journalistic or reportable value in that 2 minutes saying, well, Charles Green said that, but we asked him to clarify what he said, but he didn't come back. We asked him 3 times. So that's maybe what we use the social media forums for. I mean,
right.
There was a situation where Charles Green had said he was going to speak to UEFA about football debt, and we said, well, actually, it's not UEFA, they deal with football debt. We've spoken to UEFA, they say, no, he's not here. And then, benefit of the doubt, go to FIFA, is he there? No. We go back to Rangers and say, what's the situation? And it's a blank wall. I mean, it's like, well, okay, so what we do then is, if we're not getting somewhere with the story, we're not getting the answers we want, right, well, we're not just going to sit here and go, that didn't happen, we're not going to say anything about it. No, I think certainly from our perspective, Scott says, with one degree with explainers, but certainly using social media channels as well, if it doesn't necessarily make a story, well, we're still going to push that out. We're going to say, well, this is, we did this, and this, and this happened. Make your own mind up. Person said this. Do you believe him or not?
Right.
You know, we leave that open to your interpretation. We'll go back and we'll ask a follow-up question about, well, can you qualify what you've said? You either get a response or you don't. If you get a response, you report it. And then we add in our own kind of pessimism, if you like, saying, well, this is actually what, you know, they've said X, but actually it's kind of Y. You know, and that's the way that's responsible reporting, in my view. That's how it's done. You don't. I mean, we're never gonna get to a situation where we don't report what someone says because it's a load of nonsense.
Right.
They've said it's in the public interest that if someone said something, you know, who's in a high position at a football club or whatever, we'll say what's said. We'll give our not perspective. We'll just explain it black and white. You know, we're not going to let opinion seep into our reporting.
Right.
We'll go into social media. We'll try to be a little bit more opinionated and say what we think, and we'll leave it open to your interpretation.
So different markets, different formats, different time constraints. All of that's
but I would never ever say something's edited out for the sake of saving face, or I think it all comes down to the merits of what you're reporting. But I mean, there's certainly platforms where you can then expand upon why you didn't say this or why you didn't say that.
Okay. Scott, you spoke about a frustration earlier about trying to get answers. Donald Fairley from Livingston, from the outside, the likes of the SFA and the SPL are either, personal opinions here, are either corrupt crooks or just bumbling fools without a clue. But from a journalistic point of view, what are these different bodies like to deal with?
They vary from time to time, and it varies what story you're working on. It's like any organisation. Listen, this is not just football clubs. I did local newspapers, police, councils, they don't like bad news stories. That's just a simple fact. People don't like talking about things that they don't want to talk about. And in terms of dealing with these organisations, sometimes they're very good, sometimes they're not so good. And it's what you have to do is you hope that there's more good days than bad days, but there's more that you can do than that, and you try and push them as much as you can to get the answers that the audience deserve. In terms of these groups, over this summer it's been trying for all of them.
Have you not had a relaxing summer? You finish the football season, you go on holiday,
I wish.
much happens.
Yeah, nothing really happens.
Sunshine.
I know, well, there you go. I mean, but I mean...
So it changes, it's not that,
No, yeah, it does, of course, yeah, absolutely it changes. I mean, there's a lot of people that go down this road of saying, certain people are corrupt and are crooks and things. I genuinely, it's not my belief. I don't believe that's what happens. I mean, you hear a lot of people, especially social media, you get this, are they corrupt and things. I don't think they are. I just genuinely believe that sometimes what they maybe perceive as being the thing to do, or the way they go about it, isn't the best way. And what we do in the media is say, well, this is what they've said. Is this the best way? And as Grant touched upon in the answer before, we can then scrutinise it in the way that the media should be doing.
And follow up. Michael?
No, I was just going to ask you there, Scott, is that in regards to social media, do you think these guys are actually at the stage now they're really watching what they're saying, they're nervous because no matter what they say is just going to be picked on right away? I mean, we're talking here about Twitter, Facebook, no matter what is said or done, I'm not saying you guys here,
sure.
Guys like yourself, reporters, journalists, are picking up that quick that these guys, like we'll mention Doncaster and Reagan, that are scared to now because they think Celtic's got lawyers or Rangers got lawyers, or it's their nerves must be away as well because they're scared of what they're saying now because everything's picked up on.
Yeah,
I mean, no matter what's said, whether it's Rahman Bajwa saying it in Scotland Today, that before you know it, Twitter's got a message, somebody's blogged it, and it's the way there you go.
I think it probably does enter their minds to some degree. I mean, in general, they've got their own PR departments to make sure that they can check of what they say. So, and when they say things on behalf of their organisation, they should be thinking about what they've got to say. It's their job, and yeah, it makes it more accessible, certainly, and they can reply to certain people in a way that obviously before social media they wouldn't reply to a fan, for example. But it's certainly changed the dynamic, yeah, but I think they probably thought about what they said before anyway.
Okay, Michael, you're now known as John McClymont working in Paris, because that question was pretty much exactly what you were asking.
I apologise, John.
So sorry, John. Hey, you're working in Paris, come on. We've got a life for Riley. Okay, closer to home, Barry Finlayson from Cumbernauld. From my viewpoint, it seems that journalists are either deliberately or just lazily missing a treasure chest of stories within the world of Sevco. Not the old and complex Rangers stories, but the new Sevco gang. For example, I noticed that bloggers like Phil McGillivan leaked the details of questionable businessman Jim Park involved in the new regime, and no mainstream journalists seem to run with any part of that. Even the most basic mysteries like Sevco's business plan, who their investors are, these seem to be really meaty stories that journalists decline to investigate. Why is this? Do you know?
Decline's the wrong word.
Missing things?
Decline
wrong?
Decline's the wrong word. Yes. That's correct, but let's break down why those reasons are. If we want to speak about bloggers, for example, Phil McGillivan, he's got to a level where he's trusted, where he has good sources, he'll be able to pull in information like that. Was it Phil that broke there? Was the Hugh Dallas email, for example?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Or maybe that was it Celtic Quick News? Sorry.
No, Phil was the kind of one that ran with it.
Apologise for the confusion. He's got great sources in there that you can put these stories out, and sometimes not all journalists are blessed with being able to be the fortunate one that gets that tip off.
Okay.
With regards to digging deeper into business dealings or what's going on in certain areas, it's not for a walk to try.
Right.
I know we speak for Mike Farrell, who's obviously not with us anymore tonight.
That sounds really sombre.
I qualified that with tonight. So apologies. There's a power digging every day on this story, trying to find things out, just try and find out what's going on, find out about the background of someone, build a story, because he's a journalist. He wants to know absolutely everything that is out there. He's got no connections that are going to lean on him to say don't say this. He's got no agenda or bias not to say something. Is there? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here when Barry mentioned the word lazy. To kind of change that a wee bit, the fact that they've been quote unquote dealt with down in SFL3, it's done and dusted. Let's look back. Is there a tendency just to not think about those stories as being big or chasing them? No, absolutely not. It's still a story. I mean, a story is a story. It doesn't matter what level it's at. I mean, sure. It doesn't matter where a story is, whether it's a multinational company or if it's suspect business dealings with someone that has money laundering in a firm that has 5 employees, for example. Anything's a story, and especially when we're talking about Rangers Football Club. Sure. Then it's a massive story regardless of what division they happen to find themselves in now. Mm-hmm. A power of work is put in every day to try and bring new areas and elements to the story. What's holding it back? Having the right sources, perhaps, being able to get the right information out of people, because you walk up to Charles Green in the street and say, all right, what's your business plan? Who are your investors? Yeah, what is he just going to volunteer it? Has it been asked? Yeah, of course it's been asked. Countless occasions by many people in here, who always constantly dig and try and find out. You hear something, you try and find out. You just don't always get there with it, and it's a great frustration for a journalist. And so, in that sense, I don't know if I'd say, but we're failing because we're failing to get that, whatever the story is. Right, but failing to try. We're not failing to try, and right. I sound like I'm making excuses here for why we're not getting stories, and it's poor. We're not getting certain stories. We're not getting. Right. And of course that's poor because other people are getting them, other people are finding their means. But we just have to keep trying, and get the next story that comes along. Everyone's trying so hard to try and get whatever the next story is, regardless of where it is, whether it's with Rangers, Celtic, Dundee United, whoever. Everyone's working away every day. And I would also say that in broader Scottish media now, there are severe cutbacks everywhere. There are so few journalists. I mean, if you consider that, speak for Mike again here, that he is the Glasgow and West reporter for STV News at the time, online, and at the time, although we have STV Local Glasgow, which involved communities and do a lot of Glasgow news, you consider he was the one man who's putting on the STV website every story of national significance to do with Glasgow. And you think about what that metropolitan area is, it's huge. Yeah. And also he was breaking stories on what was going on at Rangers. You try to tell me that guy's lazy. He's away for a lie down. That's why he's left.
In a broader sense, it's taking it away from STV slightly. A lot of these stories are dealt with by news teams or by special investigations teams in other organisations. Mark Daly, for example, who's an excellent reporter and with great pedigree. He's working on that story and just that story. Go to Mike's point of view. Mike Farrell here, does lots and lots of different stories in lots of different areas every day. Right. Mark, not try to take away. Mark's a great reporter, but he's on that story and that one story for months on end, gotcha. And he does it very well. So, okay. But as I say, in general, these stories, I don't want it to just be about a Rangers story. When you have to dig for these stories, it can sometimes take that amount of resource to eventually. And even these things can take months and then to produce. So
we have the people capable in here to I don't take away from Mark either, because everything he does it was fantastic. The documentaries he did, great work, great investigative work. You can't tell me that STV wouldn't have been able to produce something similar with the time and resource. With the same. Okay. Well, just picking on Mark, obviously the big thing with Mark Daly, the 3 letters EBT. Paul Tomlinson from Cathcart. With a prima facie case being found by the initial SPL investigation, with the dozens of EBT dual contracts being found by the BBC, just touch upon Mark Daly, how does the panel stand on whether or not titles from the former Rangers club should be removed once the fuller investigation is complete? It's in the SPL rules for it to happen, so when the SPL have their disciplinary panel and I know they say it's a prima facie case, but if they find them guilty, then that is one of the things available to them. And if you would consider that, okay, if these players were improperly registered, if that is what is found to be the case, then if you were to make an argument for any sanction, if you like, that's probably one of the ones that's quite high up the list. Is it a sanction, or is that just a natural consequence? There's obviously a lot of debate in social media about this. Getting your titles removed is not. Well, sanction in the written down on paper type thing, that this is an SPL punishment that's available to them. Is it sanction or consequence in that regard? I'm not actually quite sure. I mean, I would say them being in the third division is consequence. It's just the way it happened. And obviously, people feel like it's a punishment because to a fan, of course, it's a punishment. It feels like a punishment. Your club has been punished by having to play in the third division for whatever happened, whether it was consequence or not. You're going to feel wrong.
So the Joe contract thing, for what you've seen with documents, from what you've seen with rules, etc., quite reasonably clear cut. If they do find that is it the simple 3-0 victories within the games, etc.
That's one of the sanctions, but that really wiping the results doesn't really make sense, because then you've got to try and reconfigure every league table, and surely that opens up legal cases for clubs that maybe shouldn't have been relegated or should have been playing in the Champions League or whatever. There are many, I think it's 14, 15 sanctions that are available to the SPL. If you're talking about if players were improperly registered, then you would say, right, okay, well, that's probably one of the main ones that we would be looking to. It would be the withdrawal of a title. Right. But I mean, that's up for the SPL to decide. I mean, everyone's got their own opinion on it, but it's not to say for certain that's what would happen if they were found through.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, the last one for this section, going abroad again, Alison Turner from Philadelphia. And thanks to Alison for sending over pictures to us actually from the recent games over there, very much appreciated. She sent a question with those pictures. The incredible story of Rangers dying in the close season seems to hint at still further bombshells and consequences to come. Can the panel take a guess at what has still to unfold? For example, the first-tier tax tribunal, the appeal, the improper registrations probe, the liquidators coming in to investigate, and possible criminal cases. Scott, what's the biggies coming? Have you any clue? And from what you've lived through in the close season, do you even begin to guess?
With this story, I think it is almost impossible to guess what's to come next. It seems as if it could have such wide-reaching consequences. So many parts of the story are yet to be closed. So no is the kind of short answer. I don't know what could come next in this. It really, you've had so many figures and so many points to this story that it really is. It isn't, as a journalist, I certainly don't have any kind of idea of what could come next.
Right, Grant, still big things to come, still massive things. This one that's going to continue to run.
Yeah, I mean the SPL case is probably, from a sporting perspective, at least the big one, and obviously there's the first tier tax tribunal and whatever their final findings will be, and then I think it's all about perhaps what unravels from whatever the verdict is in both those cases.
Liquidators coming in, could that be more and more news?
Because they're going to go back through the books and see when, perhaps review the sale of the assets for what was 5.5 million, but when you break it down it was actually even less.
Yeah, exactly.
Sold off various parts. I mean, I think players were, I can't remember the figures off the top of my head, but I think players were were almost at least 50% of what was actually paid for. So, not to suggest there's any impropriety there at all, anything going on, but I mean, certainly BDO, the liquidators, when they come in, will be looking at what's going on, and I know Mike and all of us are going to constantly have our ear to the ground and badgering them to say, right, okay, is there anything that that we're going to be looking at here? What, is there going to be a story in this, or is it just going to be a case closed?
You're going to have less and less holidays, you realise?
That's I'm getting that impression so far, yeah.
Fill it in the overtime for us. Good man, okay, we'll wrap up that section there.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Okay, doc, there, just relax now. The big media ones are out the road, okay, and breathe. So let's go into football questions. Our friends down in Liverpool from the Packy Bonner CSC, they got in touch and they asked, what 3 changes would the guys bring into A, Scottish football in particular, and B, rule changes generally in the sport of football? Any ideas? Who wants to jump in?
Scott came in an hour before this podcast because we needed to talk about this.
Yeah. Brilliant. Scottish football. Well, Scottish football, personally, I would like to see, everyone talks about this, playoffs between First Division and SPL. I think that needs to happen. Right. It would add so much. I've used to report on the SFL quite extensively, and it's such a good idea. It almost beggared belief that it took so long to, like everyone in Scottish football, to introduce a good idea. So I would say that would be one thing I would like to introduce to Scottish football. Hopefully with the reconstruction talks that are been mooted, that seems to be one thing that's stuck. So no matter what comes to pass of these reconstruction ideas, hopefully that is one that will stick.
I'll get through. Okay. Any other ones? He's allowed you 3.
Well, I'm going to take it off the field actually, and it's something we touched on earlier. I want people to talk about Scottish football in a positive light. I know it's not a rule change or something like that.
No, that's right. Yeah.
If there's an attitude change, if we're going to, we've got great young players coming through. We've actually got a game here that's interesting and exciting. Mm-hmm. I just want people to talk about the game in a more positive light. I want it to be something that I don't go abroad on a holiday and I happen to get speaking to a local and you say Scottish football, they laugh in your face type thing. You want something, you just want the reputation of the Scottish game to be rebuilt, and we have the responsibility of settling us around this table at least. We want to be the ones who are pushing forward. Let's just talk about it positively, let's pick it apart constructively. That's what I want to see in Scottish football.
Good stuff. Any other one you want to throw in as your third for Scottish football before we talk about rule changes in the sport itself?
What about the section of the bodies running Scottish football? You're reporting on it. You're mentioning SFA, SFL, SPA. There's no way here of amalgamating some of this here, because it seems to be, I think one of the guys that were on earlier said that all these bigwigs and crooks and different things running Scottish football. There seems to be too many people. Must be some wage bill here for a start.
There's a clear problem having 2 league setups. It could have worked in theory, but I think we saw a case in point this summer when we had the situation of Rangers not being voted into the SPL, the new company not being voted into the SPL. And then it was a case of, there is actually no pyramid structure in Scottish football, not even between the SPL and the SFL. It's something that's written in a contractual agreement that they kind of do this quick swap once a season and close the door quickly, and get one club up and one club down. So that's not ideal whatsoever. I think there needs to be, in this situation, the summer could be dealt with so much better. We had this clear one league system with clear mechanisms in place for this sort of thing. So, and the SPL is an independent company that's trying to market this 12 club division. Whereas the SFL is having to do its own bidding. It's seen as the poorer cousin of Scottish football, although it actually produces some great games. It does produce some great games, some better games in fact, and it's actually a very, very good product they've got down there, but they're done down by the fact that the SPL is going to get the bulk of the money because it is the top division, and the SFL just has to feed off scraps and doesn't get the exposure it deserves. So one league set up again would benefit Scottish football in that regard.
Okay.
I don't necessarily agree with having the SFA running the league, though. I think still perhaps, although they should be close. I think one league body, one football
something
association.
independent in some way. Right, okay. What about the sport itself, Michael? Would you change anything within the game? Goal line technologies, offside rules, 6 referees, 12 linesmen?
I don't like these extra linesmen, 4th, 5th, 6th officials. I hate all that. That's rubbish, because they're not willing to take authority. They're not willing to make decisions. We've found that out in Europe the past couple of years. One of the things is obviously technology, the goal line thing. They did it in rugby league down south and worked really well. But obviously the guy who's running the world football has always been against it from the start, and doesn't seem like a committee running football anymore. It's just one guy, and that's dictating. A dictatorship there. But
that a news story?
No. Exclusive. What was that hashtag again? MikeFSTV. He's still alive. He's here. But no, seriously, going back to the sort of brass tacks and all that, there is like how we promote it, how we're looking in that. And you're talking to Grant about the football. There is a great product there, but get back to like kids playing football out in the street. I grew up in a time when football, you were out in the street all the time. Not playing your computer, not playing your Xbox, and we need to get back to this here and get back to the kids playing football, coaching, proper coaching. In Carluke where we are, there's a couple of clubs pushing that big time, and hopefully through the authorities they've got a bit more money into that to get that going, and I think we should get more promotion on that side of things, getting back to the kids back into football. And many kids are decent at football now in Scottish football because they're too interested in their computers, they're not playing, they're not practising. That's the problem.
I find it interesting the Scottish FA, they do a power of work in grassroots football in conjunction with the Scottish Government. I find it interesting that Mark Votta's approach to coming in, and he's doing great. He appears to be doing a really good job trying to build up a framework for youth football in Scotland going over the next 10-20 years. He's focusing quite heavily on the elite. And that doesn't necessarily fit in with your ideal of, all kids should be playing football. Of course they should, and I think the Scottish FA would push that anyway with the government. But I find it interesting that the SFA's mantra now, and I think it's based purely on performances of the national team and criticism from within the game, that their mantra now going forward is focus on the elite, the very best kids in Scotland, and put all the majority of the resource into that. So that's interesting.
But putting the sign up no ball games, right? So you're looking at it and going back to the basics here and saying no ball games. Kids are wanting to play football, right? So no ball games. But then you analyse it and say, well, these people that put the signs up, I've got kids. The kids played there when they were younger. There's a bit of double standards, and I'm finding it's quite difficult to grasp. You know.
And they would have played themselves.
Aye.
Exactly.
You
need to remember, you're 62 this year, Michael. Scott, throw these two easy ones at you. John Dolan from Bells Hill. Best game you've ever attended, best game you've ever seen on TV.
Best game I've ever attended. In terms of
whether it's for excitement, performance, whatever it is.
Right. Well, in terms of actual skill, I was lucky enough to go to a Chelsea-Barcelona Champions League game in 2006. That was incredible to watch, simply because of the players on show. Ronaldinho that night was just fantastic, and so perhaps it wasn't the most exciting game I've ever been to, but in terms of appreciating the skill and the viewpoint I had, you could really appreciate that kind of elite level of the game. Most entertaining game I've ever seen was probably strangely a Cowdenbeath Stirling Albion game. In terms of reporting for a game I reported on, most entertaining. It was a season where Stirling Albion trailed their rivals Al Athletic by 12 points, I believe it was, with about 6 or 7 games to go in the season, and they must have played about these 8 games in 20 days, and this was the second last of them. They were 3-0 down at half time and scored 2 goals in the last 4 minutes.
Whoa.
So from a reporting view and being a very kind of young reporter, you get so ingrained within the team and that structure, and you're still learning your trade, so you kind of get ingrained with this is the team that I've followed for a full year, and to see that, it was extremely exciting. And
quite a story, yeah.
So I'll maybe go for that one.
Fantastic, good man. Grant?
Yeah, I think in terms of games that I've been at, I think it's been more about the experience rather than the technical ability or anything like that. For example, Livingston's games in Europe when I was growing up, getting to go to them, getting to go to Austria this year when we were Stone Graz. We got beat 5-2, but my word was that. What a fantastic experience to be involved in that kind of thing. And then Livingston beat them 4-3 in the return, and Barry Wilson scored in the 90th minute, one right in the top corner, and a kind of seesawing game. One incredible. And it was the experience of that. That's what I kind of live off. There's been other Livingston games again when I was growing up, and suddenly revealing my kind of allegiances are just spilling out of you. But the adventures they kind of had, especially in my formative years, you're talking about 10, 11 teenage years. I mean, those being able to be part of that kind of thing, such an experience. And we're talking more recent history, Scotland, Spain at Hampden.
Yep.
And again, it was because of the atmosphere and the experience, but just seeing this happen, it was almost because it beggared belief. It's those kind of things. It's just happening. You've always got faith in these sort of things happening, but you never ever believe something like that. Because on television, again, it was something when I was growing up. World Cup final in '98. That was probably the game that actually really sold me on football.
Was it?
Yeah. I don't know what it was about it. Was it France? Obviously, were a great team, but Brazil were just. We were talked about that time as the overwhelming favourites for that, and just being able to see that sort of thing unfolding, and they weren't the underdog, but just seeing that kind of thing play out in front when I would have been 11 years old. Sorry, guys.
Go to your grandfather, Michael. Michael, you've spoke about tons and tons of Celtic games in previous podcasts, so forgetting name aside, what's the best game you've ever seen in TV?
I'm going to throw one in here just for last season there. We were, as a club, we were all down the local pub, and it was the final game of the season, and then EPL. Man City, Man United. And I don't know what your guys' feelings are here on Man United and Man City. I support Celtic, but apart from that, you think, well, when Man City scored that goal, we all jumped up off our seats. The whole pub jumped up to celebrate that goal. The excitement of that build-up, because they all kicked off at the same time, and I like that kind of thing where let's get more of that, the excitement back into it. And I think just Stuart, because that question was thrown at me, you have not had a chance to think about it. These guys have. But, I agree with that. But see, to come back to the one you were attending there, you were talking about the Martin O'Neill years where it's the European nights. Hopefully we'll get them back to the Champions League, and you guys will probably get a bit of coverage out of that as well. But there was a game I attended, it was over in Stuttgart, and it was to and fro, 1-0 to 1-each, 2-1, all that kind of thing. And one of our sister clubs up in Edinburgh, who we're friendly with, the guy up there had jumped up on the fence and ripped one of his fingers off.
Oh,
right? And one of the things here was, that sticks in my mind, was the score on it was 5-4. You know where that's leading there, don't you guys? And every time I see the guy, he always puts his hand up, all that, and say 5-4. You know, and but that whole trip was absolutely amazing. And again, it's just to and from the goals. You know, try to keep in touch. And we through here, you get many away goals. You know, and that's the excitement of watching football. That's tremendous.
That's football, regardless of teams and titles and stuff. Yeah. That story's worthy of shambolic. You should get that one, I tell you. Right, the last question from Eddie Wright in Newcastle. He gives us 3, so I'll split it up between you. Michael, most skillful player you've ever seen within Scottish football?
Playing in Scottish football? At Tynecastle, playing Scottish football was Lubo Moravchik. What he done was, right in front of us, he took a corner kick with his right foot, bang, goal. Right, I can't remember who scored at Hearts, I can't remember who it was.
Right.
5-10 minutes later, put the ball down again, left foot, course, bang, goal, exact same, both feet.
Standard skill.
Best two-footed player I've ever seen in my life, in my lifetime. Younger than you 3 guys, so you know, it was fantastic.
Good man. Scott, most skillful player ever seen within world football? Is it your Ronaldinho?
Ronaldinho, I think. Yeah, Ronaldinho. I was lucky enough in that same game. Leo Messi was still very, very young, so he didn't have the best night that night. But yeah, Ronaldinho on fire, absolutely brilliant.
Good man. And Grant, Maradona or Pele, Ronaldo or Messi?
It's like a personality test. What sort of footballer do you like?
This is it.
Pele for me. Just for the achievement of being able of scoring so many goals, even if it's in dispute.
Excellent.
Of course, I mean, these were players I wasn't there at the time. I didn't experience it even growing up, and these guys were all, retired or close to retirement. Well, Maradona was going into the 90s, I suppose, but these are players I never experienced firsthand.
Sure.
So I mean, I'm talking retrospectively and what I've read and what I've watched. I would go for Pele. Ronaldo, so Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi every time. I know Ronaldo's very. I know this kind of flies in the face of what I've just said. Ronaldo's a very direct player and gets the job done. Messi just. There's no complaints from Lionel Messi, just does it, and it's with such grace.
And seems to love the game as well.
Absolutely.
Just loves football, the smile. Excellent, good man. Okay, well, we will wrap up with Shambolic.
Shambolic!
Yes, thank you for that, Chico. Shambolic. Now, guys, you won't have heard this before, but this is where we just go off the beaten track, nice and easy, your own personal stories, can take it any tangent you want, and what we do is we give you a word or a phrase. And for yourselves, working behind the scenes, down the trenches, it is bad day at the office. So you can take that whatever way you want. It might have been a grumpy manager you were trying to interview, or a story you were chasing, or the news guys giving you grief right before 6 p.m. You have a wee think about that, and I'll just go through the information section for the listeners, because there's tons of things going on. On Sunday that just passed there, the Celtic Grave Society held their latest event, which of course was marking the burial place of Brother Wilfred down in Dumfries. And I'll give you 2 podcasts to listen to for that one. The Homeboys from last night, we had Jim from Celtic Graves who phoned in and was fantastic, talking about what they were doing as a society, just keeping the history alive for everyone. And of course this is the special 125th year. And also Chris Kujala, who are a good friend from Hill Media, his Paradise Report podcast. What Chris does, and has always done, he goes to these events on behalf of the fans and actually records it, everyone that's there. So listen back to that, and you can do that on hillmedia.com, I should say. This Saturday coming up, Paul Larkin's book launch, of course, is happening, and we've got an internet Bampot party along with that. That's after the Hibs match. Blackfriars in Glasgow, sold out, and we'll be talking to Paul and Josh Gaffney, who's recently redeveloped the full Hill Media site. On Hill Media, there's going to be a massive banner, Michael. This game on, let me think, is it going to be Wednesday? No, they're going to do it possibly for the Hibs match itself. It's going to be above the Green Brigade section, so look out for that one. Okay. Next Monday, Tic Talk will have special guests from Celtic Quick News talking about all the charity events they're doing for We Oscar for Life campaign, so we look forward to hearing those boys. Joe McKenna has got his new song called A Boy, and that's on iTunes, with all proceeds going to York Hill Hospital. Loads of charity stuff there. And last of all, ourselves, our Shambolic merchandise store. You asked us two things: create more clothing and stuff for the ladies, and also offer the free postage campaign again. Well, we're doing that this weekend coming, Friday to Sunday. If you use the voucher Tic Talk, all one word, then you'll get free postage on your t-shirts and hoodies and all sorts of stuff. And the guys are going to come in and order tons of that for the STV guys. We really appreciate that. Spreading the word. So, Shambolic, bad day at the office. Scott, where does that phrase take you?
Bad day at the office. Okay, it takes me to the 23rd of December 2009.
You are scarred.
We had, the company I used to work for, we did 4 local newspapers. 1 was paid for, 3 were free papers. We had to get the editions out on that later that day, so they'd be out for Christmas Eve. Delighted with that, obviously. Even we're delighted when Alo's town Christmas lights decided to blow all the electricity in the whole of the town centre, which meant that power was down from 10 o'clock in the morning until about 10:30 in the evening. Then so we eventually got this adapter out in the middle of the street going. The editor of the paper, Ronnie Patterson, God bless him, then decided he was making a cup of tea, blew the whole system again. So we eventually got home, must have been about just after midnight, in probably shambolic editions of those newspapers, and just hating Christmas and hating life. So that was most definitely my bad day in the office.
Safe in the heart.
You can't look at a Christmas tree without trembling.
Oh, how about hating Santa? Yeah.
Brilliant. Grant, can you top that one?
Well, I've got 2. I don't want to take it down a tone. I will for a second here.
Okay.
You know, the worst day, bad day at the office. The worst day at the office was I worked at Livingston Football Club and I went into administration. I mean, terrible location. But let's go back to what was leading up to that. A bad day at the office. It definitely falls under the shambolic tag, let me tell you that.
Right.
I mean, I was still am young. I was naive, trying my very best to be the employee that, well, anything you say, I'll try and do it for you. Of course, I'm not going to say no, anything you ask of me, I'll try my best to do it. We got to this ridiculous situation at Livingston where they had no safety certificate for the ground. I was still working there, I think. Actually, it takes me into that. They had no safety certificate at the ground because Angelo Massoni, the owner, hadn't paid a 5-figure bill to Scottish Power, so they cut him off. So he wasn't allowed to play games. So we had a friendly with Plymouth Argyle. They were coming up to play at the club on the Tuesday night. Right. And this was on the Monday morning. I was in doing various, I think I must have been doing website stuff for the Plymouth game or whatever, and speaking to the manager, and the chairman comes down and goes, Grant, we've not got anywhere to play tomorrow night. This isn't going to be sorted. I need you to help me. And then, right, where's this going? And this was at a stage where he had no allies left, and I wouldn't want to call myself an ally. I was just this employee who was desperately trying to do the right thing. And I had the task of trying to find the ground for Livingston to play a pre-season friendly, and I would qualify that even further with the fact that I had an interview here at 3 o'clock that day.
Oh, no way.
So when I came, it's actually in this room. Right. The interview I had. I came out here at whatever time, 4 o'clock or whatever, missed calls from Airdrie, from Clyde, no sorry you can't play here, etc, etc. And to my credit, or maybe not actually, the game was played at Bathgate Thistles Creamery Park, much to the annoyance of the championship club, which Plymouth were at the time. Yep. Was like a junior ground changing rooms, but no.
Does everybody point to you saying it's him?
Well, that was me. I came away from this place feeling quite positive and said, enough. I mean, that really was, and there were so many stupid things that happened that year, like mismanagement, etc., etc. But that was the one I was like, right, that's it. That's just, it was atrocious that I was even asked to do that kind of thing, and ridiculous that I even agreed to it. But listen,
that's a bad season at the office, isn't it?
Indeed.
Everything coming together. Superb, well done, guys. And thanks a million again, very gracious of you hosting us tonight. Might talk to you at some future point, but loved all your opinions, the background information and what's going on, of course, when you're trying to do your daily job, so thank you.
Thank you so much for asking us to come on, it's a privilege.
Absolutely. And of course, special mention to Andy, who couldn't make it. He was either, confirm or deny this, he was either hiding in the STV bunker because the questions from the internet bandpots were too hard, or he was sick.
He was sick.
He was sick, okay.
But he may have been sending in some late questions from...
Stay on message. And thanks, of course, to Mike, who is no longer with us. But Requiem held at the weekend. But Michael, you can join in. The guys are banned from this. They're not allowed to shout hail, hail, of course. Until the next time on Tic Talk, hail, 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 hail.
Tic Talk, talk, talk.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed listening to this latest episode of Tic Talk. Thank you once again to the guys for taking part. Hope you found it interesting. A couple of things just to add in at the very end when I was discussing some of the things in the information section. The Hail Hail Media banner that I was talking about is actually going to be on display on Wednesday's Champions League qualifier match. So it's going to be a massive banner on display outside the stadium, and then it will be on display just above the Green Brigade section inside the stadium. So keep your eyes peeled for that. That should be a cracking sight to see. Secondly, people were asking about how do you get into the Shambolic merchandise store, for t-shirts and hoodies and caps and stuff with all the Carluke Shamrock, Shambolic, TikTok stuff. Well, if you just go to carlukeshamrock.com and click on the online store button, that will get you in there. And if you fancy anything there, if you order it this weekend coming from the Friday to the Sunday, where August is changing into September, if you just put in the voucher code TICTALK, that's TICTALK, then you will get free shipping. There are no shipping charges on it if you put that voucher in. So it's TICTALK and it's all one word. So that's us. Hope you've enjoyed listening, and we will catch you the next time on Tic Talk. Here's Joe McKenna's song, Worldwide Tim Parade, to play us out as normal.
The thing I want to see the most is the Glasgow Celtic score. I've been to Munich, been to Paris and Berlin. I watched injustice fall upon you in Turin, and I've shared the pain and glory with the friends that I have made as I dance from place to place in green and white on a worldwide Tim parade.